Right around 2 weeks ago, I created and shared a video where I listed, in my opinion, the top 10 most beautiful towns in Newfoundland, on the island of Newfoundland, in the Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador. That inevitably led to people feeling snubbed, so I thought I would put together a top 10 snubs list. So let's get right into it. The town of Burin. I could have maybe picked Garnish or Lamoline for this list of snubs from my most beautiful towns in Newfoundland list, since I really wanted to kick things off with a town on the Burin Peninsula, but I have to select the town of Burin. Burin actually covers a fairly large area, as it is now made up of an amalgamation of a bunch of pretty little communities and coves like Black Duck Cove, Collins Cove, Bulls Cove. Burin gets big points because Smuggler's Cove, the Roadhouse restaurant and pub, is basically in the town of Burin. It's kind of on the outskirts, but technically I guess it's in the town of Burin. I got a full video about Smuggler's Cove where I talk about the place, but also the visionary behind the entire place, so I'll link that down below in the description. From basically between Path End and Bulls Cove, you got a view of the really cool Turtle Islands, and you can figure out why they're called that just by looking at them. You got the general beauty of the place. I mean, these are all the reasons why I had to include Burin specifically on this list. I've been told to look out for Cook's Lookout next time I'm in the area, so I haven't seen it for myself yet, but I'll be sure to check that place out next time. Brigus. Brigus is beautiful at any time of year, but I'm going to go ahead and say that at Christmas time, it's one of my favorite places to visit. It really looks like a town that was dreamt up by Hallmark for one of their terrible Christmas movies, but it's a real place with real people living real lives. The rock-solid Builds folks have certainly left their mark on the place over the past few years, and you can tell there's been quite a bit of investment into the town. You can see the construction and the restoration of historic properties all over the place. Plus, you have the tunnel, the Bob Bartlett memorials.
Brigus was basically Captain Bob Bartlett's town. And Bob Bartlett was born in Brigus, but it's one of those things that you may be familiar with the name, but do you actually know anything about the man?
I'm going to throw in a couple of side notes in this video. For the first side note, I just want to say I'm not going to include St. John's on this list. Not just because I think it'd start a war in the comments, but because even if you're watching this video as a non-Newfoundlander, I have to assume you already know something about St. John's. So what's the benefit of putting the capital city in this list? It is a beautiful place, and if you're interested in learning more about it, there are a pile of videos on my channel that you can check out. So I'll link at least one in the description to help you get started if you are interested specifically in the city of St. John's. Ferryland. Now, staying on the Avalon Peninsula where Brigus and St. John's are located, I'm going to talk about Ferryland. It's also located on the Avalon Peninsula, and it's actually located on the site of the original Avalon settlement. It's the second oldest settlement in Newfoundland, the oldest actually being right next to Brigus, which I just talked about in what's now Cupid's. So we're sticking with yet another old, very historic community here with Ferryland. Now, the town of Ferryland is home to, as I said, the colony of Avalon. There is an archaeological site there in the town of Ferryland that is open to the public to explore. There's tours and sort of period pieces being put off by staff at the town of Ferryland. But for me, the highlight of the town is actually just outside the town. It's the lighthouse and the grounds where the lighthouse is located. Stephenville. Stephenville isn't beautiful the way a lot of other Newfoundland towns are beautiful, but it is a very unique town. It was shaped by the American presence in the town over the 20th century, through a large part of the 20th century. And if any of the big projects pegged for the town ever actually come to fruition, the town could be in for another major change in makeup. Unfortunately, after the airport foolishness that we've been sitting through for the last 3 or 4 years, it's hard to stay confident in what might happen as World Energy GH2 completely changes their story as to what they're trying to do here. But I suppose there's still a chance something can happen here. So maybe it's not the prettiest town, sort of conventionally speaking, But it's definitely one of the most interesting towns in Newfoundland and is one to watch in 2025. Salvage. Located on the tip of the Eastport Peninsula, Salvage is a beautiful town at the end of a highway full of beautiful little towns and beaches. You also need to drive through Terra Nova National Park to get here, which is very special itself. There's a rich history in Salvage with evidence of human activity dating back thousands of years, well before Cabot or even the Vikings. The landscape is just beautiful. There are two little coves here with the houses sort of clustered around those. There's some really big steep hills, the famous Damnable Trail.
I'm in Salvage right now. It's one of those places that it is a gem in Newfoundland, but it's almost like you're cheating when you come here because the road from the highway to get here is about maybe 20 minutes, whereas if you go to Bonavista, you got to go for about an hour and a half, or Fogo Island, or any of the places that you might be thinking about as a getaway in Newfoundland. You usually have to travel for an hour, 2 hours from the Trans-Canada Highway to get there. Like I said, you're cheating to get here because you only have to drive 20 minutes off the highway, and this is what you end up getting. Yeah?
My second side note, it's really important for me to highlight this point. All right, I can only talk about towns that I've actually been to on these videos that I make. So there are a few towns that come up over and over that people say should be on my most beautiful towns list, and I can't argue. I just can't put them on this list because I haven't been there yet, and the footage in my videos is all real and all my own. So I hope to visit Burgeo this year for my first time. And if I can make that happen, I'll be taking the ferry to Grey River and Francois, hopefully Ramia too. And if I'm able to do it, I'm also planning on heading up the Great Northern Peninsula for my first ever visit. I've been through Gros Morne before, but just up as far as Western Brook Pond to see Western Brook Pond. So I never actually took the time to explore the towns in the area like Norse Point and Rocky Harbor. I've never actually seen St. Anthony or Lansom Meadows. And of course I've never been across the Strait to Labrador, and I've yet to see Battle Harbor. So I can't include any of these communities on any of my most beautiful lists because I haven't seen them. But I bet I'll be adjusting my most beautiful towns list after I do actually set foot on these towns. Lassie. I was only lucky enough to spend one afternoon in the town of Lassie, located at the tip of the Baie Verte Peninsula. And in spite of it being a pretty miserable old day, cold, windy, plenty of rain drizzle and fog, it still stands out to me as one of the most beautiful towns I've ever seen in Newfoundland. And it's also on my very short list of most underrated towns for people to visit.
We're in Lassie right now. It's a beautiful town. It's one of those places that you see in pictures. It's pretty, but it's a lot bigger than I realized. It's still a very small town, but it's a lot bigger than I realized. A lot more houses. It seems like we are going to go to Fleur de Lis next, which I think is a much smaller town. Baie Verte we're going to stop into as well. But we found a nice place for a bite to eat here called Critches. I'll let you know how that goes. I'm trying another fish and chips, of course, and then I'm going to get a bowl of soup to go with it, give you my feedback after I eat it. Kind of excited to try it out. Really friendly service, I'll say, to start. This is a long trip up from the Trans-Canada Highway, but so far, even with this weather, I gotta say it's absolutely worth it. It's completely blown my mind just how beautiful this town is.
The town of Baie Verte. Not to be confused with Baie Verte. The town of Baie Verte overlooks Conception Bay on the end of the Baie Verte Peninsula, which is one of the fingers of the Greater Avalon Peninsula. Driving into town is one of my favorite things to do on a Newfoundland road trip. As you approach the town, you drive down a fairly steep hill, and when you get the town in your sights finally, there's this parallax effect where the town appears to rise up on the horizon as you drive down the hill. It's really something to see for yourself. You know, video footage doesn't really do it justice, but it's a really cool thing to see. Twillingate. I've made a point to get myself to Twillingate 4 times in the past 3 years. It was a very hard decision to cut Twillingate from my list of 10 most beautiful towns in Newfoundland, but picking 10 towns is really kind of an impossible task. So here we are. The landscape of the town is beautiful. The amount of things you can do in or near the town in the spring and summer in particular is incredible. The history is fascinating. They call it the Iceberg Capital of the world. Whales seem to love the waters just off the coast. Twillingate is just incredible.
If you want to see more of what Twillingate looks like, by all means check through my videos and you can see a lot of what the town looks like under blue skies and in summer type of weather. And we're here to enjoy one night in this amazing town.
Burin.
I'm standing here right now in the town of Burin for the first time in my life, and it is absolutely breathtaking. Back in 2003, 2004, I lived in Toronto and I was studying audio engineering, and I was getting close to completion, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do when I finished the course and who I'd want to work for, or if I was going to start my own thing or whatever. I started looking into recording studios in Newfoundland, and I stumbled upon the town of Burin because Sim Savory from Sim and I had his studio here. This is where he's from, and I'm actually standing in Burin right now, by the way. Just a little side note there. But Sim had a studio back then, and it was pretty famous, but I didn't know it because I was still pretty much a kid at that time. But I remember like looking into the town of Burin, just kind of, I never knew about it, didn't know where it was on a map, didn't know much about it at all. So I started researching it, and then kind of ever since then became mildly obsessed with Burin. And it took me 20 more years to get here, but I'm standing here right now in the town of Burin for the first time in my life, and it is absolutely breathtaking. Again, I've been saying that a lot lately, but this place is, you know, there's a reason why I became obsessed with it, looking at pictures of it just from the internet. But actually standing here, like, the pictures never seem to do places justice. This is another one of those examples where it's even more beautiful than the pictures made it look to be.
My final side note, I just want to include a couple of honorable mentions here because, I don't know, I can't really see myself turning this little series into a trilogy. Not at least until I get to those other towns I mentioned in my previous note above. So I want to mention St. Bride's, Botwood, and Leading Tickles here in this video. St. Bride's is at the south end of the beautiful Cape Shore Drive on the Avalon Peninsula, the southwest coast of the Avalon Peninsula. And it's the last town you're going to drive through before reaching the access road to the Cape St. Mary's Ecological Reserve. Botwood, like I said about Stephenville, may not be the most naturally beautiful town in Newfoundland. It's pretty, but not, it doesn't really stand out compared to some of these other towns. But it deserves to be on this list because of the murals there, if for no other reason. And I got a separate video where I talk about these murals in more detail. Leading Tickles might be one of the most peaceful feeling towns I've ever visited, so it earns an honorable mention based on that fact alone. Trinity. I stand by my top 10 most beautiful towns list, and it was important to me that I didn't force in any ties, like 10 spots, 10 individual towns, right? I had to cut Trinity from that list, but that never sat well with me. Still, there's no other town from that original top 10 list that I made that I was willing to drop, so Trinity will be designated, I guess, as the prettiest of the snubbed towns, at least in my book. If I said that Brigus looks like a Hallmark Christmas movie set, then Trinity looks like a Disney movie set. It wasn't far from Trinity where scenes for the 2023 Peter Pan and Wendy movie were shot, but this town wasn't actually purposely built as a film set, it just looks like it. It is a historic little town that has received a lot of investment and care in the form of building, business, and infrastructure restoration in recent decades. The Rising Tide Theater has been located there for maybe about 30 years now, if I'm not mistaken, and they've taken an old property and fixed that up and made that an incredible sight to behold.
Say cheese.
Oh, Jesus, I didn't realize you had that tall one.
Making a top 10 list was an impossible task, so I figured maybe having a top 10 honorable mentions or snubbed list would make things a little easier, and it wasn't. So if I still missed your favorite town or the most beautiful town in your eyes, let me know. All right, just don't get too mad. This is all meant to be a bit of fun. All right, until next time, see you, loves you, bye.